President Cyril Ramaphosa sending a 7-page letter to all ANC members yesterday. In that document saying the ANC was, quote, accused #1 in the dock, end quote, around corruption. You'll have seen the outrage over the last month or so about the alleged corruption involving the families of ANC leaders and COVID-19 procurement. The President also saying ANC leaders should step down if they're implicated in corruption or charged with this corruption. This afternoon, we understand the ANC's National Working Committee is discussing this. COSATU's Central Executive Committee also discussing this at the moment. Solly Mapaila is the first Deputy General Secretary of the South African Communist Party. Solly, good afternoon to you. I imagine as the SACP you welcome this letter from the President.
Thank you, Stephen. The SACP is welcome first the letter from the President. We think it's an important call that he takes the responsibility for leadership of the movement to make this, because corruption is literally weakening and tearing our liberation movement apart, eroding the public trust that the ANC has earned over decades of selfless sacrifices in the front line of the national liberation of our country. And this is largely caused by our proximity to political power and the relationship that has developed between private interest and business interest, and those in public having private interest using the public platform. And of course, at the core of this has been the tender system that we are calling for it to be reviewed. We have long made this call about 10 years ago as the Communist Party that we must de-tenderize the state, because the state now has become only a procurer of services, even of basic things that the state used to do. It's procuring at an exorbitant prices, and we have now seen this interest of particularly business people and greedy public servants and officials coming on board. We welcome the contents, particularly on its measures about lifestyle audits of all government officials, particularly at the procurement level, all officials in that space, SOE executives, the political executives, as well as those of us who are in senior political leadership outside government, who may have influence to those who are in government, given our responsibilities. So this, we think, is very important. But what is critical is that we want action to be taken and for people to go to jail. And that's why I want to call on the criminal justice system to really play its role and not create an impression that the President must start going to arrest people, but it must play its role, arrest people, prosecute them, make sure that they don't orange overall, which is also a campaign that's started by civil society, which as a Communist Party we fully support.
Do you think that the letter from the President is going to result in Zandile Gumede stepping down from her new position in the KZN legislature? Do you think Bongani Bongo is about to step down from his position in the National Assembly?
Certainly, the deployment of Comrade Gumede to the legislature was a slap in the face of the African National Congress, particularly because she has been officially charged and she's undergoing a court case. And they could have allowed that court case to come to an end, but instead they took this position. I think it should be reversed politically, but we must make sure that wherever it is, interventions must be as urgent as possible. We must also strengthen the integrity committee, because if we fail to take all these measures, whatever we say, whether it's a letter from the President, will not be implemented because it won't have an effect, because people don't care whether there's public outrage or whether the movement's own value system is based on integrity, honesty, empathy, and so forth. So they don't care about those because they are looking for self-interest issues. So it is in this regard that we think that such kind of interventions can be made. In fact, it will also send a very clear signal. And also many others as well, at all levels, so that the movement is not on the temptations of those who are facing this current action and what they are doing about it, so that the NEC, when it sits and look into this matter, it can take sweeping steps comprehensively across the country and cleanse the movement of this fraud that sits in.
I mean, Solly, isn't the balance of power in the ANC where it's always been, in the National Executive Committee?
Well, it's not much about the balance of power, really. I think, for instance, what would have happened if the NPA, for instance, have arrested people and they are found guilty in a court of law? Because we have always affirmed the rule of law as this democratic government. And therefore, in fact, as you know, former president of the ANC has undergone several court cases So the ANC on this matter is still committed. So all we need is the law enforcement agencies not to be too politicized, but to take action when it's necessary, irrespective of who's involved. So the balance of political forces in that regard in the NEC doesn't matter. Actually, what matters is also the view of society in this regard. And our society is, we are clearly they are as straight as we are about this level of corruption that are taking place, particularly in the midst of a pandemic, that we're trying all our efforts. In fact, the president has led, and as well as the cabinet, has led the intervention in this COVID-19. And this is taking away this good work by corrupt elements in the system.
Sorry, it's not the world's best line, but I do want to continue because I think this is an important argument. You talk about the NEC and that the balance of power doesn't really matter there. But I mean, Malusi Gigaba, Nomvula Mokanyane, are they really going to be part of a conversation that's going to see the NEC change and decide that people who are charged must step down? I mean, there's no evidence of that so far.
As long as we follow policies and principles of the organization, we should be able to take appropriate decisions, irrespective of who is involved. And that's what is critical. And I think that the president has started it well by raising it sharply, addressing to all members of the ANC across the country, as well as in leadership positions. So therefore, it doesn't matter who is involved. And I think this has always been affirmed. If a case is put on the table and appropriate institutions are able to act, there should be no problem with that.
The president has now gone essentially over the heads of NEC members in a way with this direct intervention, this direct appeal to members. And I know that, the Secretary General's office has issued these instructions to structures of the party. I mean, I understand that. But if what the president has asked to happen does not happen, so in other words, if Bongani Bongo does not step down, if Zandile Gumede does not step down, doesn't that actually show that President Cyril Ramaphosa is very weak and can't stop corruption in the ANC?
No, not at all. I think what is critical is that the ANC officials must direct all provinces to make sure that such deployment as that of Zandile Gumede can then be reversed. Because in terms of the legislative framework, provinces decide on who they prioritize in terms of sending to the legislature, particularly when they replenish the list after a year of the election. So this is what actually would have happened. They would not have taken this matter for a discussion with the ANC officials. But now with this call by the president, as well as the message that they've sent through the Office of the Secretary General, to make sure that all provinces and regions account on actually those who are facing disciplinary action in their respective deployment and what they've done about it. It assists the movement to actually step its foot down to make sure that this kind of laxity of not taking serious and urgent action against corrupt behavior is actually coming to an end. And therefore, we really believe that there should be nothing that can stop the NEC from moving ahead. And in fact, all the platform or factions in the movement are all appalled by this corruption levels just taking place now. It is actually embarrassing to the movement. It's completely unacceptable, and it must be nipped in the bud as soon as it's possible.
Haven't we been here before, Solly? I mean, isn't this like telling the ANC president, as he once was, and talking about then President Jacob Zuma, to stop doing business with the Guptas? I mean, there are all sorts of calls for that to happen. It didn't. Why is this time going to be any different? And I mean, the real conversation is, why do we keep expecting there to be a change in the ANC? I'm giving you a chance to answer that. I mean, so many people are, frankly, more outraged than I can remember.
Well, these are different matters. In this case, for instance, the president of the ANC was involved. In the previous one, it was the president. And therefore, it would have made other comrades basically fear to come out and say to the president, look, leave office or let's take this particular action and so forth. But in this case, it's the president himself who's leading this process. Like I said, in areas where, let's say Zandile Gumede, the investigation and everything else was concluded on time. We'll not be talking about her redeployment into the legislature. So we also need to beef up institutions such as the SIU and others. Because in some instances, people will tell you that when you take a matter to the SIU, you are taking it to the graveyard, to the cemetery. The investigation will take too long. And that's where we need to beef up capacity to make sure that the criminal justice system, particularly on issues that have been investigated, on many other investigations from forensic reports in municipalities, in different departments across levels, they need to make sure that those things are followed up and proper action is taken. But it doesn't matter how many times the president will say, let action be taken, because he's not the head of prosecution authority. He's not the police. So it is important that the political mandate that he has given is critically applied and make sure that people are able to account. That's why all institutions must act in consonance. But politically, I think there's general agreement across the movement that urgent action needs to be taken.